Hey everyone, I'm Faith Roswell. I'm still terrified to talk on camera, but as my last video seemed to do very well, then welcome to my new faces. I set myself this challenge because I teach self-defense and I want to start running mini workshops, which means doing exactly this now, talking on camera. And as it terrifies me, I set myself a challenge of really committing to a YouTube channel and hoping to beat that fear out of me. So it's actually going pretty well. Now, I tend to talk about cultural events with a little bit of a different perspective, also a healthy dose of true crime and a fair amount of self-defense. So if any of that is what you like to listen to, stick around. Now, today I was not going to talk about what I'm about to talk about. I'd written it off as Hollyweird. You know, where Hollywood people have been too rich and too famous for too long, so long that they have no idea what it's like anymore to be a normal human being. And I'd written the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni situation off as that. But I then realised it actually affects you. So I'm going to talk about it today. If you don't know the situation that's going on right now with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, it's a kind of a four-parter at the moment. Part one, Blake Lively promotes her latest film called It Ends With Us, which is about domestic violence, and yet promotes it like a romantic comedy.
Is in theaters now, so grab your friends, wear your florals, and head out to see it.
She tells everyone to grab their friends and wear their florals and go out to the cinema and have a jolly old time, with absolutely no mention of the fact that this is about a woman being knocked about. So this was taken terribly. This was dreadfully received. People who had actually survived domestic violence, gone to the cinema and lost their minds, understandably, were saying this is completely inappropriate. Blake was using the advertising of the film to advertise things like her alcohol brand with a cocktail named after the abuser. Men who abuse alcohol are 6 times more likely to also abuse their partners. There is a strong correlation between alcohol and domestic abuse. This went down like a lead balloon. And all the while, Justin Baldoni, the director, who also plays the abuser, is speaking very candidly on domestic violence. He's being very measured in his response and not shying away from the subject matter of the film.
This is your night, mister.
No, this isn't my night. This is a night for all the women who we made this movie for.
Meanwhile, this is Blake's reaction when the interviewer suggests that women who are affected by domestic violence might want to talk to her.
Asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share, or I could just location share you and then we could
And it turns out a lot of people had a lot to say about Blake Lively, so older interviews started to resurface where Blake was incredibly rude to a journalist congratulating her on her pregnancy.
First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
She was very pointed and rude to co-workers, and on top of that, the more famous one is she got married on a plantation, which is just in no way excusable in any way, shape or form. So all of this stuff, all of this digging, all of this background on Blake seems to reveal that she's not the nicest of human beings. That's part one. Part two, Blake fights back, and she releases documents that seem to say that she was hamstrung by her contract that said, do not talk about domestic abuse. Keep it light-hearted. Talk about the flowers and the style and the outfits. Don't talk about the serious stuff. And revealing Justin Baldoni as an inappropriate sexual creep. So Lively says that he was forcing kisses on set, that he kept barging into her trailer while she was breastfeeding, that he kept on telling her about sexual experiences, saying that he had a pornography addiction, saying that she smelt nice and like sniffing her hair, all the kind of absolute icky behaviour that just puts chills up any woman's spine. That's what she's saying that he was doing on the set of It Ends With Us. So that's part two. And part three, of course, people responded to that. Hashtag I stand with Blake. This is horrendous. Of course, it completely makes sense that now if Blake had this awful abusive experience and now has to watch the guy who has been abusive and creepy, talking with his hand on his heart about domestic abuse and seeming like a saint, of course she's going to be awkward. Of course she doesn't want to talk about it. Of course she wants to keep things lighthearted. It all makes sense.
you're supposed to tell a story well and make people feel, but you're also supposed to do it in a way that
And the final part 4, Justin fights back. And he's suing Blake. So now the two are suing each other, and Justin Baldoni has receipts. Now, there may be some very damning records about a smear campaign allegedly orchestrated by Baldoni and his team, but he also has some fairly damning looking receipts about that he had texted Blake and she said, "I'm just pumping in my trailer, you can come in if you want and go over some lines." And at a point when she'd said she's worried that she smells because she was, I don't know, doing something strenuous, and he said, no, you're fine, you smell nice. And all of these things are allegedly reported on and confirmed and in texts and can be proven, allegedly. We will have to wait and see. Still, one of the exchanges that has been released is one of the most awkward things I have ever seen in my life. The most awkward, weird, Hollywood message to him, how Taylor Swift and Ryan Reynolds, her husband, are her dragons, comparing herself to Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones, who she refers to as Khaleesi, lady, that is her title, not her name. And it all being very weird. Basically, quietly using their clout to threaten him is what it looks like, allegedly. So it's all a massive mess. And so, of course, after this, everyone's back to Blake is Cruella de Vil. Blake is embarrassing herself. Blake is a horrible person. Now, I'm going to come back for just a second before I get really controversial and say I called it. You can be a nasty person and suffer from the actions of some creep on set. And Blake Lively is not the first person who has been hamstrung by an awful filming experience and a contract. If you look at the making of Don't Worry Darling with Florence Pugh, that was full of drama, and yet Florence Pugh was able to politely but clearly distance herself. My point here is that Blake has been acting for long enough that she knows how to conduct an interview, she knows how to work around subjects, she knows what Hollywood is like. I genuinely think she had no clue that the backlash against the way she did the advertising would be so bad. Obviously right now everything's very alleged, but there's a lot about Blake's story that doesn't seem to ring true. If she was truly told in her contract, you must never ever mention that there's domestic violence in this film at all, that seems very strange based on the fact that the director does talk about it. But also in the infamous interview where she's almost laughing in the face of victims saying, "Oh, well, what do you want? Do you want to talk to me? Oh, shall I airdrop you my location?"
Asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share. Or I could just location share you and then we could...
She could have simply said, "I'm an actress playing a role. And if you're affected by anything that's in this film, I really encourage you to seek out therapy and counselling, and I hope that you're okay. And I hope that you, like my character, are a survivor." She could have said something like that and not laughed in the faces of women who understandably might want to talk to her. She's not the first actress who has played a role that's resonated with a lot of different people who then still gets asked about the role and the character. So there's a lot of what she said, there's a lot of this story that doesn't seem to ring true for me. So this is what people are currently discussing. There's a lot of discussion about he said, she said, what exactly is the truth? But that's not the bit that affects you. My conclusion is that Blake Lively has a very nasty streak, but we're actually going back here to point 3. Hashtag I stand with Blake, we were all wrong, now it all makes sense, etc, etc. We as a society are very uncomfortable with seeing bad people as victims. And so when someone who has got a bit of a reputation, like Blake Lively, is being victimised, allegedly, we as a society have to undo that by making her into a saint. We have to undo the nastiness that she's shown, allegedly, that she is capable of in interviews to make her a more credible victim. And we don't want to admit that we're doing it. But we could have stood with Blake without trying to undo her actions and her rudeness in the interviews surrounding the film. So if allegedly Justin Baldoni is this awful creepy sexual abuser and has been creepy to Blake in the film, she could have been Cruella de Vil and she still shouldn't have to put up with that abuse. But we don't like to talk about that as a society because we don't like a flawed victim. So we have got to make Blake Lively a better person. Now, this has happened before, it's happened a lot, and one of the people I want to talk about is Caroline Flack. Caroline Flack was a British TV presenter, and she was known to be very friendly, very warm, very caring, perfect demeanour for a television presenter, somebody that seemed like she genuinely sympathised with everybody that she came into contact with. And as she did reality TV, then that was really important. So she presented The X Factor, she presented Love Island, and she to read about her after her death by her own hand, you would think that she was an absolute bloody angel. However, Caroline Flack was dating a 17-year-old when she was 32, which she described as being a laugh at first until I started being called a paedophile in the street. Oh dear. So this was Harry Styles that she was dating. Harry Styles had only been famous for less than a year when he had been on The X Factor in 2010. Caroline Flack was presenting The X Factor in 2011. Now, I don't know if she was presenting I don't think she was presenting the season that he was on. I just double-checked. She was presenting a spin-off called The Extra Factor, the same year that he was on The X Factor and then the year after. But imagine it. Less than a year of being famous, and you're dating the woman that's presenting the show that made you famous, who is already a famous woman in her own right. There is something really fucked up about that power dynamic. She also had a lot of struggle with various mental illnesses. That's not to demonise her, but just to add context. She was also accused of assaulting her boyfriend, the tennis player Lewis Burton. There were several accusations of violence and abuse by Caroline Flack. Sorry, I keep saying Caroline, it's Caroline, I think. Several accusations of abuse by Caroline Flack. However, when she died by her own hand, people painted her, literally sometimes on billboards, as this angel. And one quote that she said became her legacy. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. Now, there's somebody else on this planet who has had a very troublesome relationship and coined a phrase that has made it onto greetings cards. And that is Woody Allen. The heart wants what the heart wants, he said, while talking about his stepdaughter. And yet, I guarantee you that if Woody Allen dies, even by his own hand, you are not going to get billboards of him with a little halo and a pretty warm, happy aura around him going, the heart wants what the heart wants. Now, yes, there were a lot of other issues with Caroline Flack. Yes, she may have been mentally ill. Yes, she may have made some fairly horrendous choices. But even if Woody Allen had been mentally ill and had various issues, you would not see billboards of him with the heart wants what the heart wants on it. You just wouldn't. So we saw this with Caroline Flack. We had to unfloor her, to paint her as a victim of press bullying who just wanted people to be kind. Calling someone out for a deeply inappropriate and honestly creepy relationship is not the same thing as bullying, even if it is the Daily Mail doing it. You know, broken clocks right twice a day, and I guess the Daily Mail can be right sometimes as well, even if it is by fluke. Now, with Blake Lively's accusations of Justin Baldoni, we have to undo anything that made her look like a morally questionable person in order to make her more of a sympathetic victim. So how does this affect you? Because while Blake might allegedly be twisting the story, there are hundreds of other women from years past to now to in the future who have been abused, been victims of workplace creepery, who might be flawed people, they might even be bitches, who are telling the truth, but who don't have the clout or the social status of their abuser. Many of these women will be people that the public cannot unfloor to make into a credible victim. And anyone that you cannot unfloor is lying or unbelievable or not really worth our time.
It should go without saying, but I mean in the eyes of society in general.
Making Blake into a perfect person perpetuates the idea that a victim has to be perfect in order to be believed. Justin potentially being an abuser and Blake potentially being a bitch are two separate things, and they should stand on their own. Currently, if a woman is seen as flawed in any way, she gets her right to victimhood taken away. Look at the way that, say, escorts, women with drug problems, women with mental illness, all of the sort of messy backgrounds that some people could potentially have. And they are often seen as a less credible victim. Look at the way that, say, the Sarah Everard campaign, people were saying she was just walking home. She was just doing this. She was just going to the shop. What if that woman wasn't? What if she was an escort on the way to or from a client? What if she was trespassing? What if she was urbexing and taking photos of abandoned buildings that she shouldn't be in? That's not just walking home, but it doesn't make this hypothetical urbexing escort any more deserving
Of being attacked.
because she has been doing something that society likes to say is flawed or wrong. Now, film recommendation for you. There's a really cool film with Olivia Colman called Wicked Little Letters, and I won't spoil it. It's, for me, it was kind of obvious who was writing the letters, but it's about this very, very uptight, very respectable, very religious woman who has been getting the most awful, obscene letters sent to her, this like absolute targeted hate mail, and the prime suspect is this loud, crass, brash, slightly slutty, ill-mannered, rude woman who lives in the village. And because this woman at the time, it's based on a true story, at the time this woman had a previous husband which was seen as morally undesirable, she was never really given a fair chance. She was just seen as this must be the person. Look at the way she behaves.
On the verge of making history here.
Was a bit boisterous once or twice.
Look at the language she used because she swore like a sailor.
Nobody swears like that. What would you say? You look like Queen Victoria. Shut up. You daft old.
And Olivia Colman's character, whose name I can't remember, was seen as the most morally upstanding person on the planet. But that happens all the time. And it happens now. We see this highlighted by this desperate scramble to redeem Blake Lively before we're comfortable talking about Justin Baldoni potentially being an abuser. So this is absolutely a recurring thing, but we actually see it a lot more when it happens in reverse, and it might be a lot more recognisable. When someone comes forward as a victim and is then asked, "What were you wearing?" God forbid they have an OnlyFans, because the defence will instantly try to attack their character or their activities or their style or their sex life, because as soon as someone's flawed in any way...
Again, I'm talking about in the eyes of society here, especially conservatives, incels, and unfortunately the legal system.
we see them as less credible or less deserving of sympathy and support. And this is why it affects us. If we don't know that we're doing it, because this is often completely unconscious. This isn't generally someone's conscious choice to go, yeah, well, she was a bitch, therefore. That's not generally how it happens. This is much more insidious. There is a reason that escorts and addicts and homeless women and other people that society has put into the failed woman, the flawed woman box, there's a reason that these women are more likely to be the victims of abuse, and that's often because the abuser is well aware that this will be used against them. I was a professional model, and I helped to jail a policeman who was also a photographer hiding cameras in changing rooms at photo shoots. He was booking models and he was booking escorts, and he was secretly filming us all. Why were the cameras not in his superintendent's office at the police station? Why were the cameras not in the police women's bathrooms? Because models are less likely to speak up. Escorts are less likely to speak up because of the stigma against all kinds of adult and sex work. And yet these things should never have been correlated. Now, I am not in any way saying that Justin Baldoni is an abuser. This is all being alleged. But this is a problem that affects real life victims of abuse who are not in Hollywood, who are not rich, who are not famous, and who, like just about everybody else, has some kind of past or something questionable or shameful. This affects them too. So, as someone that teaches psychological self-defense, which starts here and starts at home and starts before you even leave the house, this is about changing thought processes. So what can we do? One of the best things I've ever heard is it's not your first thought when you're confronted with a situation that defines you.
It's actually your second.
If your first thought is, well, what was she wearing? And then you go, no, this is how I was conditioned from growing up.
But then your second thought is, how can I help to stop this man from treating any other woman like that ever again?
It's your second thought that defines you. Number 2, call out abuse without focusing on the victim's personality, flaws, meanness, bitchiness, anything like that. The victim's personality shouldn't really come into it. And number 3, remember the words of the awesome Giselle Pellico, shame must change sides. If we are considering reporting something and are afraid to do so because maybe there's something in our past that we're worried will be used against us, we as human beings the world over are messy and problematic and flawed, and we've got pasts, everyone. Shame must change sides, because none of that should make us ashamed, only the actions of the abuser. So this case is playing out, reflecting terribly on Blake Lively, but somewhere out there is a woman accusing someone and telling the truth, but with no evidence and a past, and she doesn't need to be unflawed to be seen as a victim. These two are separate. We've got to stop making victims into saints in order to sympathise with them. Thank you so much for watching. This took a little longer than I was hoping it would. I'm still not very confident filming on camera, but I really appreciate all the support and the comments and the follows. Clearly some of you want to know what I have to say, so please stick around. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and let me know if there's anything that you'd like me to address. Stay adventurous, rock on, and I'll speak to you soon.